Hello, my name is Craig Foreman. You may know me, you may have been past this video, but look, I wanted to take a quick couple minutes to just walk you through how to think about data, particularly around engagement. Oftentimes I'm trying to convey the things that I've learned and seen and the power of leveraging data well to executives and to leaders on why it's important and the value that they can be getting and adding to their decision-making process, and also around focusing the right dollars in the right places. I can talk about it, but sometimes when I show it, it helps. Now, it's important to share a couple things with you. My background is organizational psychology. I've spent close to 15 years working with organizations around engagement. Most recently, 6 years as lead people scientist at an organization called Culture Amp. You may or may not have heard of Culture Amp. They build tools to do just this, to bring data to the table to help organizations more properly measure employee engagement, culture, and then use that data in an effective way to make decisions. So we wanted to walk you through this. I'll be looking at the tool. This is the Culture Amp tool. I think these things can be applied to other tools if you're using them. This is the tool I love most. I've used it with hundreds of clients. It's super powerful, but that's a different conversation. So let's go ahead. I'm going to start real quickly over here on the, let's get this out of the way. On the survey itself, look, when an organization runs a survey, the first thing that's going to happen is you are going to send a survey out to your employees, right? You're going to get a link. The goal here is low cognitive load, making it easy to understand questions. All of that's been baked in. That's question design. That's a separate conversation. What I want to call out here is, first of all, these first 5 questions, we call them overall. On the other side, when we slice and dice them differently, these are your engagement questions. A great engagement survey should start with your engagement questions. In this case, say, stay, and thrive, right? 3 buckets. Pride, I'm proud. I would recommend those are those say questions. Stay, I see myself here in 2 years' time, or I'm currently looking. And thrive, motivated to go above and beyond. What you'll see in any good survey is you should collapse a series of questions together to create a bucket. Otherwise, you're just getting the answer to a question versus we're looking at subsets. So you'd open with this 5-point Likert scale. Right, point being easy, 5, you're not making it too broad, too big. There's only one neutral, so we look at that versus agree, strongly agree, or disagree, strongly disagree. Also, these colors are here because of color blindness, so it's easy also for if you're colorblind, but accessibility, right? So the employees will move through that first. So this is our overall, the engagement scores to see how engaged that employee is. And then you're gonna go down through a series of buckets. Now, what I wanna call out here is, think about this again from this like almost like a funnel, right? Like cognitive load, company confidence, big, our leaders, your manager, people and teams, your role. Subconsciously, it's helping the employee move through very quickly, and it makes sense, and it's a framework. And in every one of these, you're typically going to have a group of questions. So I would advise that if you're building a survey, try to think about this in buckets and a group of questions that you can put into each of those buckets so you really understand the bigger bucket, and then you can drill into the specific questions, right? So they'll go through, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but each of these has a series of questions all the way down to these action questions. I believe that action will take place, really powerful question because of the survey. You may add things in here like my managers reviewed these with me if that's something you're promoting. All right, so that's a survey. But what I really want to get to here is what happens on the back end and what's the power of data. So what we're looking at here is the results themselves. What you can see here is this main insight page. So in this case, you'd have a high level summary of insights. We can look at participation, then we can drill into questions and heat map. I want to call a couple of things out. One is this is your engagement score. So what we spoke about, right? Favorable, that's strongly agree to and agree. Neutral, that's that middle, and then strongly disagree. Another thing that's really important is the benchmarking. So what you'll see over here is this is a benchmark. In this particular product, what you can do is you can add from a series of benchmarks. There's hundreds of benchmarks that can be added into, you can look. My advice on this is if you're looking at the company overall, look at external benchmarks. That's great. See how you're doing against your peers, but don't over fixate there. And also I'd say that as you start, if you're looking at a particular team or you're slicing and dicing it, I would move that over to comparing it to yourself. And the end of the day, if I'm running a team, I want to see how I'm doing in comparison to the organization, not looking somewhere externally, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you are your own competition. How well are you doing it, and how are you moving the needle in those areas? Here's engagement, but if I click on that, what I can look now is I can look across, like we said, those 5 questions, right? So this is what's really interesting. You'll see here, these are trend lines. So over time, as you do that, you can see the trends. But again, we can look at this, we can organize them by favorability. So in this case, recommend and pride are the top, with looking for a job at another company scoring lower. I'd also, this is, where we can pick this apart. Maybe you're running a grocery store and this is a certain subset of your cashiers are saying that. Maybe that's okay, right? That's important to tease out. But what I can also look at that is, and this is where a lot of companies don't go as far or have the ability. In this case, you are sending over demographics. So now what we can do is look at this against demographics. So for instance, I see here very quickly, there's a 37-point spread across department. I can open that. This is now telling me my engagement score across these departments. So that tells a different story. Sometimes one or two departments may be pulling the overall score down, right? So in this case, you can see our customer success seems really strong. As I move through design and finance, have some engagement issues. So that might be a side conversation we have. Also look at things across, let's say, gender. How are we doing with our women versus male non-binary folk, right? And again, some other things I'll call out. All demographics, you can load whatever you want. So maybe you've engaged in leadership training. You can put yes, no leadership training and then be able to see how did engagement impact that. So a lot of power in demographics. And I'd say think about that, especially if you're investing in initiatives that you can just put a simple tag in there and understand how you're going against that. And I also want to call out, you can drill down in any one of these questions in the same way. So for instance, one of the biggest indicators of retention, simply ask people, do I see myself here in 2 years' time? So I could click into this one and look specifically at the score. This is your organization as a whole, right? But very quickly I can identify, are there areas of problem? Department, right? Finance and design, there's a looming problem here with your retention. I would talk to those leaders about talking to their employees and really better understanding what's going on, because I can tell you that there's a much, much, much higher likelihood that people in finance and design will be leaving your organization than from your customer support or your people operations team, right? So again, very powerful to be able to drill in and see that information. Okay, so we're gonna come back here to this insight page like where we started. I can do that for engagement, but these are those buckets I spoke about before. Now, what you present to your employees, making it simple, bigger buckets. On the back end for your data analytics, we can sort them into different buckets to give us a little more depth and insight. Same thing here, right? We're looking at work-life blend, management. I can organize those by looking. What I want to call out, look, in this case, innovation's not so strong. It's probably one of your biggest focus areas, 43% off. I guess this comparison is pretty off against all of them. But I want to call one thing out as we're looking at that, and that is, you see we have our green, our favorable, our not favorable, our red, and then our neutrals. I just want to call out, when you're thinking about this data, those neutrals are important. Those are what I call your fence sitters. And oftentimes when we see big groups of fence sitters, especially if we slice it and look at it in different ways, that's your biggest area to make an impact. Those are people that can go either way, right? So don't ignore that. Pay attention to those fence sitters when those data sets come in. And again, with any of these, we can drill in. I can look at leadership. I can open it up and go in there and see the same thing. I can look at the questions themselves and also across any of those demographics to help me better understand. Now, I want to come in here to the questions. So questions is going to help us if we want to look at individual questions. So this is each individual question, right? So we can organize these by favorability scores. Let's say in general, we just want to look at our scores. What are we strongest at? Our workspace. I'm able to arrange time out of work when I need it, or I know how my work contributes to the overall goals. However, I can flip it around and say, well, what are my lowest scoring scores? I have access to the learning and development I need. We're encouraged to be innovative. Important always tells a story, but there's more to the story, and that is by simply looking at scores alone doesn't tell us everything, because what you're going to see here is this impact. And this is one of the biggest things I think a lot of organizations aren't getting, and that is we started with the outcome factor, the engagement. What this system is doing is looking at your teams and your organization's unique engagement scores, and then looking at those that were engaged versus those that were not engaged. How did they score? Giving us a relationship of the impact of these questions to engagement. So, yes, this is our lowest score with a low impact on engagement, right? But if I come down here, about 10 points higher, I believe there are good career opportunities for me, right? So not your lowest score, but look at this. It's one of your highest relationships. So if I was working with this organization, we talk about, where do we focus? What's so critical about this? I'll give you an example. Almost always compensation is one of the lowest drivers of engagement. It's also one of the lowest scoring questions. If as an organization, if you're jumping at the lowest scoring questions, you can invest a lot of money in your compensation program and get very little lift on what you really want, which is engagement. Maybe career opportunities, investing a fraction of that money in career opportunities in some new program could have an impact here, right? And ultimately drive engagement. Also, I can sort it by that. So I can see what are my highest engagement or my highest impact. Look, what you want to see is high score, high impact, right? So Pied Piper, great company for me to make contribution to my development, very strong, high relationship, right? Versus career opportunities. So this is a company that people feel like they're being able to develop themselves, but there's nowhere to use it. There's nowhere to go with it. So that could be a conversation. And that might be a reality of that organization. And maybe it's around communication and how do we better deal with that. But at least you know. And also kind of honing in on what are the areas you'll see these green flags. These are the areas the system calls out that you should focus on, right? Now, remember, I said we can do this by, let's say we can do it based on a filter. So maybe I want to look at it just based on department. And I only want to look at my customer success department, right? So now I can put that filter in there. Now what I'm looking at is overall insights to just my customer success. But now I want to change the benchmark comparison, right? So now it's customer success. How's customer success going against each of, against the organization overall? So that tells a different story. So just thinking about that with benchmarks. Okay, the final area I want to come into, two more areas. One is the heat map. So I'm going to take this off. This is really powerful. So we've spoken about the tool, how to see things, dig in, ways we can extract. But the heat map gives us a way to look at across large groups. So let's say I do want to look at department. I pick department as the grouping I want to look against. Now what I get is our departments across the top, each of our buckets, and we can see across here how well it's going. This is the overall score for the organization on the left, and each of these scores shows for these departments how high above, green, darker green further above, or below, darker red further below. So now look at that. This really tells us this design situation. However, let's say sales. Sales looks good. Sales is doing pretty strong, yet except right here. So I can open this and I can drill in. We're encouraged to be innovative. So what I know is sales is doing really well, but for our sales leadership, if there's one thing to focus on, let's talk about how we can drive more innovation within our sales teams, if that's what we want, or communicate and talk about it. But you can see how quickly we can identify issues, right? People operations, a strong performing team, but I see this -9 here. So let's take a look. Workloads are divided fairly, and I feel like I'm part of a team, right? So if I was working with the leader of that team, we can really hone in on that. Might not be a problem across the organization, but for a team that's performing really strongly, there's an area to focus on, right? So super powerful to be able to understand this and then step back and look at it in aggregate. And that's across any of your demographics. So maybe it's against your tenure, right? So we can look at how do people feel across the tenure, right? Our 4 to 6 year employees are struggling the most, right? Where our 2 to 4 years seems to be the sweet spot. Pretty powerful, right? And you see how fast I can move through here and get all that information. The final thing is I'll show you is comments, right? When you run a good survey, you're going to get comments. And how do you dig into that? How do you understand those comments? Let's go ahead and look at it based on topics and themes. So just give one of the comment tools to help you here is looking at this in a word cloud. So it's looking at sentiment. So was it positive? Was it negative? Where are you? Come on, topics and themes. There you go. Helping us better understand what's being said in the organization. So what we're looking at here is overall sentiment. Was it positive comments versus negative comments? And the number. So the size of the circle is how many comments. So I can see one of our largest leadership, 6.2% of the comments, super positive. Learning and development also big. Career, you can see those are more right here in the middle. But systems and resources and salary, a lot of the comments were down there. Then if I wanted, I could drill in and take a look at those comments themselves. Other things that are interesting around comments, and you can look at those are attached to different questions. But other types of filters you can look at with comments. So I think it's really interesting to think about things like, let's say we had a question that was strongly agree, so high score, yet negative sentiment, right? So think about that. Good scored question, but they had something critical. These are really important to look at, right? When you have people that are scoring you high, but also have something critical to say, those are typically really important. So how quickly you can hone in on those. Those are just a few of the examples of what we can do. But I think at a high level, what I wanted to share was thinking about how you can leverage data and the layers, that a score is not just a score, there's context. What's the score? What's its relationship to engagement or the outcome you want? And also that benchmark, right? That tells a story. And when we're working with organizations, now we can really pinpoint, understand where to go look, where to ask the right questions, and where to invest dollars that are going to drive what we're looking to drive and not waste dollars on things we're not sure about. And finally, run another survey and see, are we moving the needle? So lots to share, but wanted to put this down in format so I could share it with people, a little quick demo walkthrough. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I'd love to continue the conversation. Culture Craig signing out. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.